It was a lively morning in the heart of New Orleans. A quaint cafe, known for its cozy atmosphere and aromatic coffee, was buzzing with activity. Patrons sipped their drinks, engaged in hushed conversations, and tapped away on their laptops. Among them sat an unassuming man dressed in a simple hat and sunglasses, quietly enjoying his coffee, Johnny Depp. Known for his iconic roles, he was in town for a film project, seeking a moment of peace before his day began. The cafe door jingled as it opened, drawing everyone's attention. In walked an elderly black woman. Her clothes were modest, her shoes worn, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. She glanced around, hesitated for a moment, and then shuffled toward the counter. Before she could speak, the cafe owner, a middle-aged man with a sour expression, stepped forward. His voice boomed across the room, silencing the chatter. "Excuse me," he said sharply, his eyes narrowing. "We don't serve people like you here. This is a business, not a shelter." The elderly woman froze, clutching her small purse. I, I just wanted to buy a cup of tea," she said softly, her voice trembling. The owner snorted. "Sure, with what money? If you're not ordering, you need to leave." A heavy silence fell over the cafe. The patrons looked on, some with shock, others with unease. The woman's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she turned to leave, her pride and spirit visibly shaken. From his seat in the corner, Johnny Depp watched the scene unfold, his expression growing darker by the second. He placed his cup down and rose, his movements deliberate and calm. Pulling off his sunglasses, he walked to the counter, his presence commanding the room. "Excuse me," Johnny said, his voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the tension. The cafe owner turned, recognition flashing in his eyes. His demeanor shifted instantly, his previous hostility replaced with forced charm. "Mr. Depp, what a surprise. Can I get you something else?" Johnny ignored him and addressed the woman instead. "Ma'am," he said gently, "please don't leave. I'd be honored if you'd join me for tea." The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. You'd want to sit with me?" "Absolutely," he replied, offering her his arm. "Let me treat you to whatever you'd like." The cafe owner sputtered, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Depp, I'm not sure you understand." Johnny cut him off with a piercing look. "I understand perfectly," he said coldly. "What I don't understand is why you think it's acceptable to treat anyone like this." A murmur rippled through the room. Patrons began whispering to one another, some nodding in agreement. Johnny led the woman to a table and pulled out a chair for her. Once seated, he turned back to the owner. "Kindness costs nothing, but the lack of it can cost you everything," he said firmly. The cafe erupted into applause, patrons clapping and cheering. Embarrassed, the owner slinked away, his face red with shame. Some customers even stood up and left, taking their business elsewhere. Johnny spent the next hour with the elderly woman, learning her story. Her name was Grace, and she had been a school teacher for over 40 years. She had lost her husband and most of her savings to medical bills, leaving her struggling to make ends meet. Despite her hardships, she spoke with grace and wisdom, her eyes lighting up as she shared memories of her students. Moved by her resilience, Johnny promised to help her. By the end of their conversation, Grace was smiling, a genuine, radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire cafe. The incident didn't end there. Word of Johnny's actions spread like wildfire thanks to onlookers who shared the story on social media. The cafe owner faced public backlash, forcing him to issue a formal apology. Meanwhile, Johnny's act of kindness inspired countless others, serving as a reminder of the power of compassion in the face of prejudice. This wasn't a publicity stunt for Johnny. For him, it was simply the right thing to do. In a world often dominated by indifference, one small act of courage can spark a movement of kindness, and that day Johnny Depp lit the spark.